Good afternoon and welcome to the Saturday Sports Special. Yes, thank you very much for being with us. Then we starting a bit, late today for no particular reason. We just wanted to get some things up, about. But indeed, lots to talk about as we try to look at what has been happening in sports over the past 2 days. Some big stories indeed. And as we heard, that's the FIFA proposal that no doubt may hinder the development for some people, as they say, the development of sports, especially the international sporting calendar. Okay, FIFA is proposing that the World Cup, that's their flagship program, that's a proposal though, will now take place every 2 years instead of the 4-year cycle. There are those, especially from the International Olympic Committee, that are against that. That's it. That basically they're saying that it will disrupt the international sporting calendar. Okay, obviously, the IOC itself has its own 4-year cycle in terms of the Olympic Games. So they're looking at all the financial implications that will have and what have you. Well, the big boys are the ones who sit at the table and make those decisions. The small folks like me and you, we do not have that say. We don't have that sort of power. And as Keith Joseph was saying, it's basically time that we get other people to the table to sit and to discuss those issues that obviously will affect us, because if they come to such a decision, there's nothing we can do about it. We don't have that sort of power. By the way, in terms of athletics, the Caribbean is seen as a powerhouse, but still without a major voice in world athletics. Who? The Europeans in particular, that have a big voice, in terms of international sports, because most of the international associations, by the way, are headquartered in Europe. So they have a big say in the decision making of international sports decision in particular. Even the International Court of Arbitration in Sports, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, is in Europe. So I had Mr. Keith Joseph, who is the General Secretary of the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. He is also the General Secretary of the St. Vincent and Grenadines Olympic Committee. And he was on our program on Thursday, and Keith Joseph was, rocking, I would say. But he made some very interesting points, which we'll get into and dissect some of them. Also, it has to do even at home in terms of CARICOM. And he is laying blame on CARICOM, that CARICOM has failed sports in the region, and it's just, as he says, lip service being provided to sports in the Caribbean. He made a very important point again. They took out of all the sports in the Caribbean, they had a cricket committee, as he says, not a sports committee, a cricket committee. So it dealt only with cricket. So the question was, what's about athletics? What's about netball? What's about basketball? What's about all the other sports? So CARICOM leaders were all about cricket and nothing about football and athletics. And by the way, track and field to some extent has probably brought more fame and glory to the region than any other sport. Track and field, okay? Just about every single island in the Caribbean probably had someone who may have had some international, success in track and field. We can't say that for probably football. We can't say that for other sports. But when it comes to track and field, whether it's Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's Grenada, whether it's Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, some way or the other. It doesn't have to be always be the Olympics or the World Athletics, but we had the Commonwealth Games and, things like the Curfew Games, CAC, Pan Am, all these international and continental championships, and the Caribbean, various islands get to participate. How many islands in the Caribbean can participate in, let's say, World Cup football? Just a few. And sometimes we don't have any representation from the Caribbean. But when it comes to the Olympic Games, when it comes to World Athletics, for example, there is representation. Just about everyone can, pull apart. So I think, and I try to agree with Mr. Keith Joseph, that CARICOM has failed and continue to fail sports in the region. And let's hear what Keith has to say, and then we'll have some additional comments on that and some other comments he made regarding the sports in the region.
Michael, it seems to me is that our Caribbean governments don't always walk the talk. Many of us talk about sports tourism, as our governments talk about sports tourism, but many hesitate to put in place an appropriate sports tourism policy. I am not yet convinced that Caribbean governments see sport as making an important impact on the economic well-being of their respective countries. It can. It has in other parts of the world. So what is wrong with us? In many of our Caribbean countries, who've been doing celebrity golf tournaments? And what is the objective? To raise money, right? It is the hoteliers. The hoteliers seem to have a greater sense of the value of sport to enhancing their bottom line, more so than the governments of the region. We are inundated by sporting activities that attract our youths and provide them with careers, provide them with livelihoods, and we're not making the leap to that being an important part of the fulfillment of your mandate as an administration, the development of human potential, the development of the individual, the whole person in the society, and making a significant contribution to the economic well-being of the society at large. Brand Bolt became bigger than Brand Jamaica. The only aspect of Jamaican life that was perhaps more significant and more impactful was Bob Marley, who continues to be relevant across the world, and his reggae music. And so we have to recognize that sport can do wonders for our economies if we do it together. And it's unfortunate that CARICOM did not, CARICOM, the sport desk collapsed. They never developed an appropriate comprehensive structure for sport and what sport can do for the Caribbean in terms of development, in terms of branding of the region, of attracting people of all sorts, of all varieties from all across the world to our region. We allow the sports desk to collapse. We put nothing really in its place. And I'm disappointed at the fact that prime ministers got together, prime ministers, heads of government got together and created a cricket committee within CARICOM. Cricket, not sport, cricket. So you've taken one item, one aspect of the broader scenario of sport without even recognizing that there are not even 100 countries playing cricket just yet. I'm not saying that cricket has not done much for lifting the Caribbean and putting it in a certain place, but it is not the only institution. And consequently, look at what athletics has done for the region. More people know Arthur Bolden and Usain Bolt than they even know some of our leaders, right? And than they know our cricketers. The fact of the matter is that we can package sport. We have a University of the West Indies. Let's make that. We finally got a faculty of sport. But certainly CARICOM needs to do a rethink in terms of its own prioritization or lack thereof in respect of sport and what it can do for us as a region, in terms of image building, in terms of impacting the economic well-being of our countries. We've all gone towards tourism in any event, but we don't see the value of sport. Too many of our leaders still see sport as frivolity. You talk about hosting an event and they tell you how much it would cost, and that's it. They can't afford it and what have you, and so on. There has to be a coming together in terms of how we can do better with sport.
Boy, what do you really think about that expose? Well, I shouldn't just say expose. I believe that for many people, what he's speaking is the bare truth, that the governments of the region are not serious about sports. They don't see sports as that important. They talk about sports, but in terms of its importance, they don't really see the importance of sports because how many of them have really used the successes of our Caribbean brothers and sisters over the years? As he says, the brand boat alone is something that, the CARICOM in itself should have embraced, and its, bold prominence on the international sporting arena over the past decade or so should have been something that CARICOM, not just Jamaica, but CARICOM could have embraced. And, we just hear the usual congratulatory messages and the photo op, and then it's back to business as usual. How many of those countries have a functioning sports policy? Functioning sports policy. And functioning meaning something that the sportsmen and sportswomen, even the administrators, can really rely on. We're still hearing of sportsmen and sportswomen looking for or having to basically beg for concession on equipment and, and things like that. So, a sports policy provides where, whoever it is, whether it's a cricketer, a basketball, or footballer, whatever, that, through the sports policy lays up that they're entitled to such and such, especially when it comes to national representation or it comes to club or whatever it is like that. So, but, a sports policy that gives that sort of guidance, it's easier probably for a politician to get a 50% concession on a vehicle or some other thing than probably a sportsman or sportswoman to get concession, on equipment that they can use to represent their country. It's kind of sad, but it does happen, and that's why, Mr. Joseph is making that point that it's just a lot of lip service being offered by the politicians regarding, it's not basically attacking the politicians, but there's so much they can do. They have the power, the political power, or as we say, the willpower to change things, to do so many things that can assist sportsmen and sportswomen. But, and mind you, they are the first to be on the airport to greet and welcome the, those who are returning. They are the first, or they have the best seat in the stadium or in the sporting facility. Somehow they do have the cushion seat. They have all the amenities at their pleasure, including the eats and, drinks and what have you. And the same sportsman and sportswoman, who cannot get something proper, and in some instances using their own resources to represent their own country, and yet for the politicians have the best seat in the house, as we'll say. Is it time for a change in the conversation regarding politicians and sports, the governments and sports? And we have been hearing so much of talk. Well, years gone by, sports used to be a part of the agenda for CARICOM leaders or regional leaders, whether it's CARICOM or OECS. We had the OECS desk, we had a CARICOM sports desk, bam. We don't have those things again. It just shows you. It's an indication of how serious they take sports on. Because we don't even have an OECS sports desk. We don't have a CARICOM sports desk. Okay? We had what they call a cricket committee. Okay? Cricket committee at the CARICOM level. But it's only when there are certain things in the pipeline that we hear about these cricket committee and these committees and this, that, and the other and things like that. So, we have to get serious. Just as how we talking about all other sectors of various economies, sports should be one, especially at the CARICOM level. Sports should be one. But unfortunately, as Mr. Joseph is saying, it appears that our leaders tend to be visionless when it comes to sports, and unfortunately, he gives them a very, very low mark. I don't want to say 1, I don't want to say 2, but it seems as a very low mark when it comes to the leaders and, CARICOM and sports, okay? He also spoke about the whole issue of which basically boils down to, again, CARICOM and our regional leaders, the whole issue of the high cost of travel in the region that basically hinders or continue to hinder the development of sports in the region. I like how you put it, in that many years ago, you travel from one island to the other when it comes to sports by, using the boats. Well, we became high tech, and obviously we flying, we in the plane, etc., etc. We want to get to point A to point B in a matter of minutes, but it comes with a price. But yet again, it's easier or cheaper, they will say, for someone, and we are seeing it now, that it's probably cheaper for sporting teams to travel to North America to participate in tournaments than probably to travel regionally. Intra-regional travel is prohibitive to the point that CONCACAF, and to some extent I'm using football, CFU, it's cheaper for them to host a tournament in Miami than probably to host a tournament in Jamaica or the Cayman Islands or Grenada and get all the teams there. It's cheaper to send the teams to probably Miami. Why? There's probably a direct flight from most of the islands to Miami, and it's cheaper to travel, let's say, from Grenada to Miami than probably Grenada, sometimes from Grenada to Trinidad. It's that. I'm telling you, it's that. Let me get some comments and we go back to a piece that Keith Joseph spoke about. Hi, Patricia. There are so many additional events featured in the Olympics in which the Caribbean could participate. However, it is not taken seriously. Pat, yes, it is. And we spoke about the whole issue of the non-traditional sports. But, in the Caribbean, we just look at probably volleyball, or beach volleyball, or volleyball itself, the tennis, track and field, of course, and probably 1 or 2 badminton, boxing, etc. But there are 30 plus sporting events on the Olympic calendar, 30 plus. And I think it's time that there's no reason why in the Caribbean we cannot get our federations organized and get more participants involved, especially when it comes to these events like beach volleyball and beach this and beach that and, sort of thing. I mean, the Caribbean, some countries in Europe and North America, they only can be on a beach, a few months of the year. Few months of the year. In the Caribbean, you can be on the beach every single day, every single year. You know, come on. We have to get serious. It's kind of sad. Let's go back to a point that Keith Joseph was making regarding the high cost. I asked him the question because it's a question I asked him 6 years ago. In Toronto, we were in Toronto attending the PASO executive meeting. And I asked him that question regarding the high cost of travel in the region. And 6 years later, it remains the same.
And what one of the problems is the lack of creativity in our governance structures. People who are still around from that period will tell you that in the period of the federal palm and federal maple, ships that were given by one of the problems is the lack of creativity in our governance structures. People who are still around from that period will tell you that in the period of the federal palm and federal maple, ships that were given by the Canadian government to Caribbean governments, enable the peoples of the Windward and Leeward Islands to see more of each other, to have sporting activities around the region at a low cost. At that time, nobody was bothering about the fact that where you would stay and so on, because we are accommodative people, and people were making sure that if you come to our countries for sport, certainly be coming to watch you play anyhow, so you might as well stay by some of us or what have you. And we've moved on from that, but we've abandoned using shipping as a means of getting people between our islands, right? We've gone to the high valued air travel and all the baggage that comes with that, the cost of fuel, the cost of planes, staying in one destination and so on. And they because, again, they do not see the value of sport. When sporting organizations apply to governments and say, well, could we waive some of the taxes? Could we lighten the burden? Could we get a 50% off? There was a time when Liat used to do that for sporting organizations when Joseph Resbury was at the sports desk. You may recall when Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Antigua and Barbuda had turns at hosting the OECS track and field championships. We used to get a discount from Liat. All of that has disappeared. And national Olympic committees, for example, which bear the brunt of assisting national sporting associations to go to competition, to help them with their development, now to help them with their rankings, and still have to turn back and fully fund national teams to go to multi-sport games, etc., etc. They're the one bearing the burden. They can't carry all of it. And as long as some associations cannot afford to go to some of the meets where there are ranking points available, right? The fact that FIFA and Norseca and some of the others have started saying, okay, we penalize you if you don't attend our major championships as regional and continental organizations, etc. That hasn't changed the price of egg, because if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. You know, there's no readiness on the part of either the private sector or the public sector to try to come up with a policy region-wide that would facilitate sport as a vehicle for economic development. There is sport for development and there is sport as development. And we need to be able to marry the two and understand that sport can be an integral and ought to be an integral part of every Caribbean country's economy.
Yes, I agree with that. But whether or not, Mr. Joseph, I don't know if we are speaking to the converted, as you will say sometimes. It's kind of sad that these are things I'm certain we have been hearing over and over in terms of sports and how sports should be treated. And we hear all the promises, but it appears that it's time that our leaders, our politicians, our governments bring them to the fire. It's time, because I think we have reached a stage, or we have passed this stage in some extent, where it's more or less a honeymoon for these politicians when it comes to sports. They need to get serious as regards to sports. And our sports administrators probably owe it to the sportsmen, sportswomen, as well as the sporting public, that they should hold the politicians accountable for these things. Okay, we're talking, a lot about diversifying the economies, etc., etc. And in this post-pandemic period, okay, where we know that some regional economies have been battered, okay, it's important that our thinking, and in some instances, as we will probably, they may make us to believe, well-educated politicians should be thinking as well outside of the box. How, for example, can they start embracing sports tourism? We have been hearing a lot about sports tourism, but are they seriously engaged in sports tourism in some of the islands? I mean, probably Barbados and the Bahamas to an extent. Well, I shouldn't say to an extent. I think the Bahamas very big on sports tourism. Okay, and it has nothing to do with politics. Government comes, government goes. It's the same. It has to do with the policy, because it's the same push, the same thrust regarding sports tourism in places like Bahamas, Barbados, Cayman Islands. You always ask this, why it is they are hosting, all these major events, all these, this, that, and the other. It's because they are making serious investment in terms of hosting. Yes, they have the capacity in terms of hotels, etc. But they have people whose job it is, whether it's in Europe or North America, to get people to travel. So they're out there, hitting the pavement, showing up at the trade fairs and all these sort of things, with all sorts of things regarding the island and what they can offer, etc., etc. So that's why you find so many people are visiting Barbados and the Bahamas, etc., etc., especially when they have these sporting events. Sometimes they make sporting events, golf tournament, road tennis, all these sort of things. And there are people who traveling for these things. Hey, they want to know about road tennis, and it becomes a popular sport in Barbados, for example. And people are traveling from Europe to see it, spending some time, a week, 2 weeks in a hotel, rentals, this, that, and the other. The economy is benefiting from that, all because of the and the various sectors involved with that. The hotels, the the tourism authority who are doing the marketing out there, the sporting associations, and all these sort of things. And mind you, all of that is happening. And don't you know, for the past 10 years or so, Barbados hasn't had the fortune of a stadium. Unlike Grenada, on St. Lucia, some of the other islands that have, constructed new facilities, Barbados has not had a new stadium. They're always talking about, rebuilding the stadium. The main arena, sporting arena, is Kensington Oval for cricket. So they haven't had international track and field and things like that. So in Barbados for quite some time. But yet for all, they've been able to attract. It says a lot. Yes, Pat, it has to do inter-island travel and cost. Another serious problem to be addressed, but to be addressed by who? Or same politicians. They meet every year. Sometimes I should say twice a year, because they have the intersessional. Twice a year, they meet, and they may talk about sports depending on what, depending on the issue. Sports may be mentioned in the closing plenary, in the resolution or whatever it is. But in terms of a discussion, breakaway discussion on serious issue of sports, the last time they talked anything regarding sports, it had to be cricket. And it was West Indies cricket in crisis. So they dealt with it. But in terms of looking at sports as a pillar of the economy, as a pillar of the economies in those various islands, no. Whether it's CARICOM, whether it's OECS, as I told you, they have dismantled anything regarding sports. Even the sports committee, the cricket sports committee, short-lived. That too. When last you hear about a cricket committee meeting, So they took out cricket, out of all the sports, have a committee, and yet for even that has been short-lived. We're not serious about that. We're not serious about sports. Yeah, Tobago has donkey races. Why not the region? Well, some people might say, if you have donkey races, probably might want to put a politician in that race. I'm just kidding. But on a serious note, even as we say, so Barbados has road tennis, Tobago has donkey races, and there was, I think, maybe in Tobago also, they have this thing with crab racing or whatever it is, maybe Tobago, I'm not certain, but I know about the crab racing and things like that. So, and I there's also one where I recall, regarding the especially, holiday period, Boxing Day, for example. Boxing Day in the Caribbean is traditionally, in most of the islands, traditionally, as they call it, a beach day. Some islands, Boxing Day is a sports day. It's a sports day. Racing, horse racing, very popular. Horse racing, the Boxing Day Classic. Down in Australia, New Zealand, Boxing Day, cricket. It's typical after Christmas, it's cricket. You have and in some other countries, in North America, for example, Boxing Day, you have basketball, you have football, you have the college, the classics, sports is very big when it comes to holiday period. It's where families will get together and enjoy sporting events. I always try to say why it is. I think it we the GFA attempted something like that. But, Mr. Joseph with all his, that's Chenny Joseph this time, with all, like Keith Joseph, with all his progressive ideas and things like that. So that too was short-lived because the guys always believe that, they have some, whatever Mr. Joseph puts on the table or suggests, they always try to find some way to throw cold water on it, and unfortunately, that didn't last long. But, what's about the beach? You can find other means of, attracting, having a family outing, and even if you want to use it for a tourism, you know, um, product, so that on the calendar every year people can look forward to spending Boxing Day in Grenada because there's some activity, some sporting, cultural, whatever it is like that. But we have to be creative. We have to be creative, and the post-pandemic provides that opportunity for a lot of creativity, and hoping that not well. As I keep saying, the leaders, they have the political will, they have the willpower to make things happen. But we need people with ideas and suggestions to come forward. Sometimes we may always criticize and attack the leaders and them sometimes, but it's better if we put those things on the table and they decide not. Then we can always say, well, hey, we suggested this, we brought this on the table, and it was shut down. Then we just saying, well, asking the politicians to come up with something, because mind you, if we depended on them to come up with something, we'll be waiting forever. Okay, we will be waiting forever because they seem not in so much in support of sports. I would say they seem to be always in the limelight when it comes to sports because it's glamorous. Obviously, it's glamorous. So, they are looking at that. Another point that Mr. Joseph made, which I thought was very important, had to do with young people's involvement in sports and sports administration. We have been very critical of folks who have been there for quite a while. I know for an instance, it's probably Grenada, for example, where we find some of our sports administrators have been there for what we'll call a lifetime. And Mr. Joseph is making the point that, while that is so, as administrators themselves, they need to start looking at successes, and getting those people involved and ensuring that they understand the ropes, because it's very brutal out there internationally. I looked at the CANOC, that's the Association of National Olympic Committees General Assembly, and which Mr. Joseph also attended in person, and some attended virtual. While a few folks from the region got to ask questions, you can see that sometimes it's all dominated by the big powerhouses, those in Europe, etc., etc. Most of the federations, most of the commissions, for example, the heads of the federations are Europeans. Heads of the commissions, for example, are Europeans. So they have the advantage. And so we need people to understand these things. It's not just telling them, hey, you're young and you should get involved and blah, 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 and things. But they need to groom into an understanding and the challenges ahead and how best they can fit into that. And I thought that Mr. Joseph made a very important point, or very important points rather, on that.
National Olympic Committee in St. Vincent and Grenadines, Dr. Lennox Adams, delivering a speech some time ago at one of our award ceremonies, noted that he has confidence in young people. He doesn't think it's a lost generation, and I agree with him. It is for us, the older ones, to reach out and hold hands and provide encouragement for them to be brought along. I think that the fact that we now have physical education and sport at the Cape level, I think that is an important initiative. And we encourage national sports associations and national Olympic committees to engage themselves with those institutions in their respective countries so that they can become miniature academies. The move by the University of the West Indies to establish a sports faculty is an excellent one, because it becomes the repository not of giving athletes scholarships, but of providing sport programming, training in administration, technical officiating, and coaching. We've just had discussions at the level of NACAC with the University of the West Indies Open Campus to basically to have the World Athletics Level 1 being part of the program for those who are doing the degree program in the faculty. And we, in the discussions, we said to them, it's easy for us to do that, but what about officiating? And certainly most of the courses about administration. Barbados Community College has also expressed an interest in doing the same. And we're saying to University of Trinidad and Tobago, university campuses across the region, tertiary level institutions, your community colleges, that they ought to put sport as a fixture and to open the breadth of sport careers. So people can become specialists in sports medicine. They can become specialists in sports tourism. So that they can begin the process of providing the governments with the human resources necessary to say, listen, we can do this and make it go forward. So the whole gamut of sport careers that are available to Europeans will soon enough be available to peoples of the Caribbean within the Caribbean. So we need to start physical education at the primary school level and to let our students know that this is not just something to make up numbers when you're going for exams, but they are real subjects as much as maths and chemistry and physics that can allow you to have a career, a pathway that makes a significant contribution to our respective societies and to our Caribbean as a whole.
Yes, again, Mr. Joseph, well said there, Pat, let me just get your comment there, and then I have some things to say. Pat is saying, they just have to listen to Mr. Joseph. He is not only creative, he sees the bigger picture, knows the problems, and he's a problem solver. He has to be given a chance to create change. One thing I love about Mr. Joseph, that's Keith Joseph. Probably I'll have to say Keith Joseph because there's Chenny Joseph, there's so many other Josephs. That he doesn't just criticize. If you look at his writing sometimes, he will criticize, but he also presents what he will deem as solutions to problems, as he's saying, problem solver, And I think we need to give him credit for that. A lot of people just, criticize, but they don't bring anything to the table. By the way, folks, you probably know by now, West Indies, well, they are 157 for 7 and Australia 161 for 2. So Australia won by 8 wickets. I don't think it's any big news. 157 for 7 West Indies and Australia 161 for 2. West Indies lost by 8 wickets. Okay, Australia won by 8 wickets. And South Africa defeated England by 10 runs. South Africa, England made 179 for 8, and South Africa 189 for 2. Okay, so we'll have to look to see South Africa out of World Cup despite win over England in Sharjah Run Fest. So even though South Africa defeated England, they're still out of the World Cup. It's the same for West Indies. They're still out of the World Cup. I don't think West Indies there's no chance for West Indies in the World Cup as defending champions. But I will still continue to rally around the West Indies. I will continue to rally around the West Indies. There's no if or but about it. Today is actually, I know some guys, waiting to give me some talk, but today is actually, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's why they're quiet today. So today was Derby Day, Manchester Derby Day. And if I can just give you the scoreline, Manchester United 0, Manchester City, or the real Manchester 2. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. Last week they were on my tail, Today we had what we call the Manchester Derby. And I find those guys are quiet today. I'm not hearing from them. They seem to be, I don't know what happened. It's Saturday. I know, especially in Grenada, it's no curfew. I don't know what's going on. I'm not hearing from them, guys. Come on, what's happening? You could have at least let me know or let our viewers know the score. Martin Alexander, Japheth, Pierre, guys, come on, man. Why are you all guys so quiet today? Yeah, very, very quiet indeed, because the scoreline is simple. Manchester United 0, Manchester City, aka the real Manchester 2. Yeah, I know. They're waiting for me. Guys, let's continue with some more from Mr. Keith Joseph, where he very eloquently, I thought, brought out some issues regarding the young people, because, we quick to say that there is no hope in, or we sometimes call it the lost generation. And sometimes, we can, I think we have reasons to say that sometimes because of what we see happening, but other times I think there is some hope, I should say. There is some hope. And in some cases, some people say there's lots of hope, And sometimes we don't just take the negative that's happening among our young people to basically galvanize all our young people, And I think he is making that point. But so you talk about the young people involvement and also the succession planning. I think that is the key aspect that I think for our young people getting involved in sports administrators, the whole succession planning. Because I gave kudos to Mr. Keith Joseph, Mr. Brian Lewis, who is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee. He's also the president of the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. And also Mr. Alfred Emmanuel, who is the general secretary of the St. Lucia Olympic Committee. These guys are very, very outspoken. When they attend these international meetings, they don't play with these international, especially those international administrators. Okay, they pepper them with questions. Okay, and sometimes they do consider them to be a thorn in the sides of them. Okay, in fact, there are times they wish that these guys don't attend. They wish these guys don't attend, and somehow these guys they find themselves there. And in this case, both Keith Joseph and Brian Lewis, they were in Greece physically. Alfred, he attended virtually and he was there with the questions. He did not play with them. But the important point Mr. Joseph was making regarding the succession, it's important because he's saying, yes, we three, we are there, we asking the questions, blah, blah, blah. But we need the young folks to get in and to groom them and to prepare them for what is at stake, for what's out there, the challenges they face. Keith Joseph.
Brian, Alfred, and I to start looking at succession planning. We really do need to have successive groupings of individuals coming forward who are schooled in the sport. It's not just about being an administrator for the sake of doing so or because you used to practice sport. The fact of the matter is that we need good representation. We need people with knowledge. We need people who become students of sport, so that they have an understanding of the dynamics of sport. The dynamic of sport in which we are involved today, the global environment, is not very different from the economic environment. The North-South divide is real. The rich-poor divide is real. The racism is real. Our athletes experience that on the field of play, in international sport, and we tend to sweep a lot of these issues under the carpet. And there's a certain adhocracy that takes control. So, we had some challenges with youths, and now the big thing in sport, the big thing is safeguarding. Everybody's talking about safeguarding. And when that happens, international donor agencies come and they pour money, and all sorts of institutions emerge on safeguarding. Now, because it's the Biles issue and the way in which the international media carried it, the next big thing now is mental health. Caribbean countries were talking about people's mental health for years because our people come from dysfunctional homes in a number of instances. A number of people who get into sport in the Caribbean get into sport to get away from their environment, from their poverty-stricken environment, from their criminal environment, from the challenges that they have from one-parent homes, etc. Right? We have had those experiences, and we have been backing up the tree about the concerns that we have about these things, but nobody was listening because we're too small. When it happens to people from the bigger countries, everybody gathers around it because the international media take it. We only make the international news when there are disasters, when we have major earthquakes, major conflicts, and somebody from a developed country unfortunately dies or is killed in one of our countries. We become hot news. And we need to understand as a people that this is not who we are. This is not who we are. We are much better than that. And we want our stories to be told. And our sports people are among the best people to tell those stories. Usain Bolt did an excellent job of that. Look at the three Jamaican girls and how they spoke at the end of the 100 meters in Tokyo. They exuded the essence of the Caribbean, right? What we can achieve if we work hard at it. And that is something that we need to do. We've not even as a people done enough to laud our Nobel laureates enough to make it impact the world, that this is from the Caribbean, this is who we are. And I think that we need to see that sport enables people to get into the bright lights, to get under the bright lights, to get into the cameras, and that they can tell our story. That we are a people who are resilient, we are a people who are determined, we are a people who are committed, and we are a people who are capable of being among the best in the world in any field of endeavor. And sport, more than anything else, allows that to be highlighted.
I told you, Zaki Joseph, such brilliance from this guy, we'll get some more from Keith. Let's say congratulations to Team Grenada. They won their first game in the CONCACAF Under-20 Championships, being played in the Dominican Republic. They defeated St. Martin by 7-0 on Friday. Yes. And just had a message here from the head coach, Mr. Michael Finlay. He says, hello, Michael. Hope you're well. All good here. First game out of the way, and now build to the next training and regeneration today here in the Dominican Republic. I want to say hello to all the players and coaching staff and officials with the Grenada national team, Under-20 national team in the Dominican Republic. And, good for you. I'm here in St. Lucia was victorious as 5-2 over. But remember, we have the French and the Dutch St. Martin. They played on the same day, actually. Okay. Yes, David Gray, thanks for that information. But we had both teams actually played. We had the St. Martin and St. Martin. We had the French and the Dutch. I think Grenada played the Dutch, if I'm not mistaken. I think Grenada may have played the Dutch. I'll double check. But St. Lucia also had a win over St. Martin, but they had French St. Martin, Dutch St. Martin. Okay, so both Grenada and St. Lucia defeated St. Martin. Right. So okay. So they played. So Grenada played the Dutch. Grenada played Dutch. Right. St. Lucia played the right. So congratulations to St. Lucia and Grenada. St. Lucia 5-2 over French St. Martin and Grenada 7-0 over Dutch St. Martin. So just one game so far. As they say, the journey just starts. And thanks, David Gray, for that update there. And we're just hoping that those guys can continue. And again, the whole issue of sports, and all sports, is interesting, and I'm certain that David might understand. I think David from Winners TV. These young guys, in the case of Grenada, for example, as I understood from the president, and I'm certain it might be for St. Lucia and others, 80 to 90% of the team, the under 20 team, they came from the under 17. They actually played in the under 17 tournament. The captain, Benjamin Etienne, he's actually a member of the senior team. He's a member of the senior team, the senior national team. He actually played and made his debut at the Gold Cup. He's a captain, and he's played in the under 20. So you see how that progression, and when you have those age group championships, they can move on. It brings me to the point with the Kirani James, for example, the Kirani James factor. Many people didn't recall Kirani James participating in the GUT games back then. Young boy, 11, 12, 14, participating. And that was the talent that they saw since then. And he moved on from the GUT games, to the, Carifta and, world juniors. And there he went to Olympic champion, world champion, Commonwealth champion as well, I think the only championship that Kirani did not win was the Pan Am Gates championship. But he is, yeah. So the progression is what we're looking at. Progression, very, very important. And, it's important that we understand how, understand how the importance of ensuring that these kids, stay in sports, see how they can move, as Keith was explaining, moving to the various level. Okay? Yeah. Let's see if we can get Mr. Keith Joseph on another one again.
Technology is developing so rapidly that we may get ways in the future that allows it to be so much better organized and better structured, and I'm sure that people will use that in the future. The challenge is that people have gotten accustomed, in Crete, people say, "Oh, we missed you. We haven't seen each other for such a long time." What happens over time, of course, is that they develop a fraternity, and that has its limitations as well as its strengths. But I think that economic sense would be that where you can have meetings virtually, you do, because that saves you the resources that you can then put into getting the people who you say are the core business of your organization, which are the athletes, to get them to competitions that are important for their development. Administrators and coaches and so on are all in it for the athlete. At least that's what is said officially. Let us put our money where the mouth is and make sure that we use the electronic media to do more of what consumes so much of our resources and make those resources available to the athletes and their coaches so that they can, in fact, better represent us, put us more established on the world map, and so bring fame, glory, and financial resources to our respective countries.
Yeah. So the point he was making there had to do with the use of technology in the future for, especially the Caribbean. So we dealt with the whole issue of the high cost of regional travel, intra-regional travel, I should say. And therefore, the point has been made of how they can use technology, well, not so much for participation, but more for the administrators, because as Keith was saying, they can probably, save some of those resources, scarce resources, as you would say, and use it for the betterment of this athletes themselves, that's the sportsmen and sportswomen. So the administrators can use more technology. Yes, there will be times that they'll have to meet physically, but there are times that they can meet virtually. The use of technology, okay, is very important, as he says, so that they can cut down a lot on the cost and pass on some of those costs to the athletes themselves in terms of them participating, more programs for them, etc., etc. Very good point he was making there, from Mr. Joseph. Well, Lincoln Toro Deputy is in the house. He had Patricia there for a while, and he did say, "I just reached Basso. Where's Comrade Joseph, a good man of sports?" Keith Joseph is actually in St. Lucia, Toro, at this time, preparing for the General Assembly of CANOC, the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. They have a blended General Assembly, so some are in St. Lucia and others attending virtually. So as the General Secretary, obviously, you'll have to be there to ensure that everything is in place and things like that too. Okay, yes, Roger, you're there too. Roger Augustine. But let me hear what Toro has to say. Our people have always been competitive at the junior. It's when they reach big man and big woman level, even as West Indies cricket, and things get real serious, that we struggle to compete. Toro, but the point is being made as well, whether or not, I think you missed that point that was made earlier. And for those who probably came on late, because I think I played it real early, I want to do it again a little later on in the program, because I think it was very important. It has to do with CARICOM and sports, and how our leaders continue to shortchange us when it comes to sports. It's something I believe that we need to have a little more conversation on, okay? And somehow I think that we need to get that conversation going. Mr. Joseph also spoke about the Court of Arbitration in Sports, which again, CAS, is based in Europe, headed mainly by a lot of Europeans, as per usual, because they dominate most of the sporting federations, etc., and things like that. So, and whether or not the region should see the need for a regional court of arbitration for sport. That was Mr. Joseph. That was a question I posed to Mr. Joseph. And he basically explained that there is something like that in motion. There have been talk about it for quite a while, similar to the Court of Appeal, Regional Court of Appeal, etc., and the lack of confidence in ourselves. We always believe that believe in the massa mentality that, the North Americans and the Europeans are better off than us, even though I'm in North America. But let's hear what Mr. Joseph, I think this is the one Mr. Joseph made the point, and if not, I'll get it. But yeah, let's hear what he has to say.
National Olympic Committee in St. Vincent and Grenadines, Dr. Lennox Adams, delivering a speech some time ago at one of our award ceremonies, noted that he has confidence in young people.
No,
He
no, well,
doesn't think it's a
actually,
lost generation, and I agree with him.
yeah,
Future
actually,
academies, the move by the University of
yeah, no, that's that's the wrong one. I'll get back to it in a moment. I think that is one has to do with the young people, and I think we touch on the young people, but the one I really want to get at with Mr. Keith Joseph is actually where he has been speaking about the whole issue regarding the court of arbitration in sports. Let me make sure that is the correct one. Sometimes technology do fail us. Okay, so let's see if I'm getting it this time. Okay.
in 2019, St. Vincent and the Grenadines hosted on behalf of CANOC, a regional law. 2019, St. Vincent and the Grenadines hosted on behalf of CANOC, a regional law conference. The main facilitators were J. Tyrone Marcus of Trinidad and Tobago and Dr. Jason Haynes of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, both of whom are also working with the University of the West Indies. And one of the outcome of that workshop was the appeal for us to have a Caribbean Court of Arbitration for sport. They immediately set to work. CANOC engaged them. They made a presentation at the General Assembly in Panama in 2019. They did a position paper. That paper has since been embellished. They have reached out to the International Court of Arbitration for Sport. They have so far gotten the enthusiastic support of the Chief Justice of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Justice Adrian Saunders, who's from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They are increasing their capacity. In fact, on Sunday, the CANOC as General Assembly will receive an update as to where they are with that project. It is gaining traction, and you would have seen, of course, the historic case recently with football and the Trinidad and Tobago Football Federation and the Court of Arbitration for Sport and how that played out. You know that we've had other issues that have arrived before the court in this year of the Olympics. St. Kitts and Nevis was called before the Court of Arbitration for Sport because some individual in Canada of Kittitian parentage wanted to participate in a competition with an organization that does not exist in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that created a hullabaloo. But the person had the resources and took them to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Happily, it was resolved in St. Kitts and Nevis's favor. But it is an expensive proposition. And while they have been reaching out to try to broaden the base of the person sitting on the court as arbiters, the fact of the matter is from the Caribbean and from Africa and so on, that still does not do enough for us. The same rationale that we use for the creation of a Caribbean Court of Justice which unfortunately several Caribbean governments have not signed on to, which leaves us in a quandary, is the same rationale that is needed for the Caribbean Court of Justice. You need people who understand the culture of our society. You need people who understand Caribbean jurisprudence. And you need people who understand that as small, poor, developing nations, it is not prudent for us to be expending those scarce resources traveling to Switzerland or engaging people in Switzerland to do our cases. We believe that we have the capacity, and we ought to show that level of maturity as independent people, that we have reached a stage of maturity that allows us to conduct our business in a fair manner. If it is not fair, then the people will say that it is not fair, and they will force the changes that need to be made. But we certainly need to create ever more our own institutions. We've done that with the University of the West Indies. We've done that with the CXC. And whatever the limitations of CARICOM and others, we have shown that we have a capacity to at least start the process of creating our own institutions to work in our best collective interests. And I think we need to continue to do that. And we need to take our matters in hand. The same way the developed world deals with issues as they arise, we have to contend with those. We may not like having to have disputes, but that is life.
Yes. What else can you say from that? Well, let me get some comments and then we'll go back to Keith again. David Gray is saying a regional court of arbitration for sport will be a welcome institution. He went on further to say, as we enter the age of athlete empowerment, we will see more athletes challenging the way in which sport is run in the region, as we saw in St. Lucia, where the footballers challenged the local FA on a number of issues. A regional court of sport administration will help establish an accessible institution that I hope will be affordable to engage and respond to cases. Yeah, well, let's see. And Torres saying, at the junior level, you can win on mere bodily strength and talent. At the international level, almost everyone has good strength and talent. Those who win are those who use more brain power, better techniques, and better strategies. Roger Augustine, I'm in total agreement with you, Michael, regarding how CARICOM leaders have dealt with it. What we need is another Alan Stanford type of investor into regional sports. And when we really start to make the impact on the world stage more consistently, then it will force our leaders to get in line. Alan Stanford type. Okay, yeah. Not Alan Stanford, but Alan Stanford type. Yeah, I understand the thinking behind that. You know, someone who brought the vision of T20 into the Caribbean, etc., etc. And you know, look where it is now. In fact, T20 World Cup. Agreed. That's why Jack Warner is my all-time hero as a Caribbean sports administrator. He went to FIFA, shake it up, and wasn't afraid to put a little thing in his pocket, just like the rest of the Europeans. You know. But on a serious note, you know, forget about the banter there. What Toro is saying is true regarding Jack Warner and how, you know, as they would say, the little black boy went there and, you know, it's like, at first, you know, they watch him, you know, who is he, you know, because Jack wasn't taking any crap from them, you know, and he was saying it as it is, and he was showing, by the way, you might say that, quote unquote, alleged, well, you know, the matter hasn't been dealt in court as it should be as yet. He's still being sought, you know, so I'm still saying alleged corruption. But Jack ensured that the Caribbean got his fair share. Trinidad may have gotten, Jack may have gotten, but around the Caribbean, Jack was able to empower others. He was able to ensure that things came to, you know, come to the Caribbean. You know, whether it was Jamaica, Cayman Islands, those in Grenada, wherever, you know, places. Yeah. You know, Jack was also able to get the referees and things on committees and, you know, all these sort of things, you know. So, yeah, we may look at it as Jack the corrupt boss, but he also played a part in ensuring that the Caribbean got its share. And and he was out there. Some may say, okay, yeah, but while he was taking for the Caribbean and Trinidad, he was taking for himself. Or, you know, you know. But what can you say? What can you do? Yeah, but very important point being made there by Mr. Joseph and agreed by David Gray and Lincoln and others, regarding that issue there. And I think for those who may have joined us a bit late regarding that whole issue regarding CARICOM and sports and the point that Mr. Joseph has made, and I know it's some may take it a bit harsh on the CARICOM leaders, but I thought he really said it as it should be said regarding CARICOM and sports and their lack of, or better word, lack of engagement regarding sports, Torres saying Jack single-handedly got FIFA to expand the number of CONCACAF countries to be represented at the World Cup finals. Yeah, and probably if Jack was still around for FIFA, at FIFA, may have gotten a little more, a little more. Yeah. Let's go on to that aspect there. And I want to hear your comments, Toro and Gray and others, some comments regarding that whole issue regarding CARICOM and sports after we hear from Mr. Keith Joseph.
Michael, it seems to me is that our Caribbean governments don't always walk the talk. Many of us talk about sports tourism, as our governments talk about sports tourism, but many hesitate to put in place an appropriate sports tourism policy. I am not yet convinced that Caribbean governments see sport as making an important impact on the economic well-being of their respective countries. It can. It has in other parts of the world. So what is wrong with us? In many of our Caribbean countries, who've been doing celebrity golf tournaments? And what is the objective? To raise money, right? It is the hoteliers. The hoteliers seem to have a greater sense of the value of sport to enhancing their bottom line, more so than the governments of the region. We are inundated by sporting activities that attract our youths and provide them with careers, provide them with livelihoods, and we're not making the leap to that being an important part of the fulfillment of your mandate as an administration, the development of human potential, the development of the individual, the whole person in the society, and making a significant contribution to the economic well-being of the society at large. Brand Bolt became bigger than Brand Jamaica. The only aspect of Jamaican life that was perhaps more significant and more impactful was Bob Marley, who continues to be relevant across the world, and his reggae music. And so we have to recognize that sport can do wonders for our economies if we do it together. And it's unfortunate that CARICOM did not, CARICOM, the sport desk collapsed. They never developed an appropriate comprehensive structure for sport and what sport can do for the Caribbean in terms of development, in terms of branding of the region, of attracting people of all sorts, of all varieties from all across the world to our region. We allow the sports desk to collapse. We put nothing really in its place. And I'm disappointed at the fact that prime ministers got together, heads of government got together and created a cricket committee within CARICOM. Cricket, not sport, cricket. So you've taken one item, one aspect of the broader scenario of sport without even recognizing that there's not even 100 countries playing cricket just yet. I'm not saying that cricket has not done much for lifting the Caribbean and putting it in a certain place, but it is not the only institution. And consequently, look at what athletics has done for the region. More people know how to bowl and Usain Bolt than they even know some of our leaders. right? And that than they know our cricketers. The fact of the matter is that we can package sport. We have a University of the West Indies. Let's make that. We finally got a faculty of sport, but certainly CARICOM needs to do a rethink in terms of its own prioritization or lack thereof in respect of sport and what it can do for us as a region, in terms of image building, in terms of impacting the economic well-being of our countries. We've all gone towards tourism in any event, but if we don't see the value of sport, too many of our leaders still see sport as frivolity. You talk about hosting an event and they tell you how much it would cost, and that's it. They can't afford it and what have you, and so on. There has to be a coming together in terms of how we can do better with sport.
Yep. So we heard it from Master Keith, Keith Joseph. Certainly. And let me see. No, I thought we had Toro on, but he is not in as yet. Okay, let me see. Toro, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am hearing you, Mr. Bascom.
Are you hearing me, Toro?
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you loud and clear, Mr. Bascom.
Right. I'm hearing you, but I'm not seeing you, but that's all right.
I know my browser will not allow me to use my camera. I don't know why, you know.
Okay. So yes, I wanted to go ahead with your point now.
Right. I totally agree with the point Mr. Joseph is making.
I'm not hearing you that clear. Are you hearing me clear enough?
I'm hearing you very clear. Very clear. Yes. I agree with the point Mr. Joseph is making, right? And
yeah,
I'm just wondering, whether there is a mechanism within CARICOM where they accept depositions from various, and I hear that word stakeholders, but for the moment, just use stakeholders. So let's say the sporting community in the Caribbean.
Toro, hold on. Toro, hold on.
Yeah.
Toro, we're not hearing you that clear. I will find a way of getting to you there. Yeah, let me find a way of getting to you, and I think it may work out. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, I'll try to see if because I think your point is very important, and I'll see if I can get you on in terms of the audio. Let me see if we can make a little connection with Mr. Deputy in technology as it is. Oh, they say actually they're hearing him, but I'm just trying to fix it up on my end there. So yeah, okay. Toro, let's try again now. I think I tried to fix it up a bit. Let's hear you now.
Right. My point is I'm not sure whether there's a mechanism within CARICOM where they receive deposition from stakeholder groups, right? So the sporting community, they need to be able to bring these ideas, these concepts to CARICOM officially so they can take it on board. So that, to me, you having a program and somebody in St. Lucia having a program and somebody in Dominica having a program on all these ideas. Just like Mr. Joseph was saying that CARICOM needs to package sports and whatever, I think we need to package these ideas and present it to them so that they are itemized, right? We also have to take into consideration, and somebody mentioned, I think it was Mr. Augustine, about the funding for these programs, right? Unless there is an existing, from the government position, unless there's an existing pool in government where they can draw this money from, right? It will mean that in order to fund any of these sporting initiatives, they will have to move money around from some other program, whether it's education, whether it's health. So we could begin with government, but the private sector has to be deeply involved in doing this sporting initiative. It will take the medium to long term to get this thing up and running. So I always wonder, right? Jamaica has been ahead of the Caribbean in terms of sports. They have been sending athletes to the Olympics, not just to compete, but they have been winning, right?
Right.
How they have been to the World Cup, FIFA World Cup, right. And there is no evidence that this exposure has drawn extra tourists to Jamaica based on the athletes winning at the Olympics, whether Usain Bolt or whether the reggae boys. Tourists will book a flight to Jamaica and they may want to see Usain Bolt trophy or whatever. Most of them may want to see Bob Marley where he was born, but nobody, the evidence has shown, the research has shown that this hasn't brought a flock of people to Jamaica. So we have to be really, really careful when we proceed with that.
But is it because the point being made as well, whether or not we are using it to attract? I mean, we may be just depending on them. We may be depending on the tourists then because of Bolt to show up in Jamaica or because of Bob Marley to show up in Jamaica. But
good point. We need to package it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Are we using it in, as they say, package it, as in some cases, like how Viv Richards, for example. So Viv Richards will, as a ambassador, sports ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda, will go to international trade fairs, will be part of whenever Antigua is out there attending international trade fairs.
Right.
So Viv
good point,
Richards
Basco.
will be out there, as an ambassador. And obviously, we're talking about cricket and other things regarding Antigua, etc. So we see all these, to some extent, these European flights heading to Antigua when Antigua hosting a test match, and traditionally you will see Barbados and Antigua to an extent always, a couple of years ago, they'll always have a test because of that sort of connection, because of the Barbadian connection in terms of cricket and how much they put into packaging, sports and tourism, packaging cricket, sports and tourism. Antigua does the same. So, I mean, I understand the point you're making. Yes, a tourist may not just get up and go, for example, to Grenada because of Kirani James, right? But are we using a Kirani James? Are we using a Usain Bolt? Are we using, who and who, Bob Marley, for example,
Right. And I absolutely agree. So at two levels, here's my recommendation. Mm-hmm. At the CARICOM level, just as they have a subcommittee for information and technology and whatever, first of all, as I said earlier, I think the sports stakeholders, Mr. Joseph, Chenny Joseph, or whoever, need to, as a delegation, need to go to CARICOM and formally present these proposals. And the second step for me will be CARICOM setting up a subcommittee, just as they have the subcommittee in ICT that will deal specifically with that. You can't do this part-time. When you meet every year, you talk about it. You need the people to be working in order for it to be implemented as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. And at the local level in the various countries, if that is to be done, they need to either have a minister or a junior minister dedicated to doing this. I don't think a minister of sports doing everything else will be able to focus on this. They need people dedicated to getting this thing. It could work. As you said, we need to package it. We need to find the right talent, and we need to find the money to do it. You can't dismiss money. You need, in order to make money, you have to spend money. So I'm saying, so you need people dedicated to doing this. The talent, they may need to give you a contract bus to come back to the region to do it. Understand? So it's a good idea, but we have to work it through and think ahead from the top to the bottom. But I really like it, I really like the idea.
Okay. I will ask you some to comment on some other things that he mentioned, but David Gray is saying, Bolt's victories ensured that Jamaica's name was mentioned all over the world for free, helping gain mind share for the Jamaica brand. Now compare the free publicity that the Jamaica brand received due to Bolt to what it will cost for Jamaica to pay for the free publicity that Bolt provided.
Of course. I'm not saying you get free publicity, right? But how does that manifest itself into boots on the ground, tourists visiting and spending money? I mean, it's just like an argument I had this week with a discussion, I won't say argument, with Mia Motley, right? And Mia Motley gave an excellent speech at the COP, whatever. And I'm saying, yes, right? It's an excellent speech. But what happens after that? After she took the picture with Mr. Biden, President Biden, and she goes back home to Bristol, do we get assistance? So, I mean, I'm all for the performance and the PR and the mention. We get mentioned when we have World Cup cricket in Grenada. People mention Dabo and that kind of stuff. But does anyone leave Bangladesh or Australia to go to Grenada to spend some money so we could pay at the hospital or pay for education? And that's my point. I like the free publicity. But I'm saying we need to move beyond that to tangible, manifest benefits in terms of money and stuff like that. Yeah.
So the argument is that our sports administrators must now engage.
Formally
engage. Okay.
CARICOM. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But then the point was made that, hey, CARICOM had a sports desk. The OECS had a sports desk. All these things were dismantled. In fact, they had they removed a sports desk and then they put a sports committee for your favorite game, cricket. No.
My favorite game is hockey.
I know. I just get it. Yeah. They had a cricket sports committee. And not a sports committee. And I think the point he's making there is that CARICOM need to revisit the whole issue of sports. And as you said, the Josephs, that's the Keith Joseph, the Chenny Joseph, the Brian Lewis and others, just as how they're engaging on the international scene, they must probably find time as well to engage CARICOM directly, face to face. Probably it's better if they ask for an engagement at the intersessional or something like that. So
absolutely.
Ensure that sports is on the agenda. Okay.
Absolutely.
The issue regarding the Court of Arbitration in sports, he mentioned that, most of these international sporting associations, federations are headed by Europeans. Most of them are headquartered in Europe, whether it's cricket, ICC, whether it's football, FIFA, whether it's IOC, I mean, just name it, squash, blah, 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 headquartered in Europe. So obviously they are dominated by Europeans. It's easier for them, participation, etc. Europe, you can drive around Europe if you want. It's a continent. Just as though you can drive around the United States or North America to be exact. US, Canada, Mexico, you can drive around. So it's easy. When it comes to the Court of Arbitration in sports, as Mr. Joseph was making, again, he thinks that we fall in short because it shows that we lack of confidence in our own people, meaning that people who understand what is really happening, and the same arguments that were made for the Court of Appeal, the Caribbean Court of Appeal, for example, and how there were so many pushbacks and things like that. We prefer to go to the Privy Council. We prefer to go to the Europeans. We have more confidence in those guys up there, Why don't you think we can have a court of arbitration for sport in the Caribbean?
Right. The first thing is that, we have been totally brainwashed, to put it bluntly, into believing that everything European and probably everything white is better and we should stick with it. We know what we have and we don't know what we'll get. The second thing, though, I think, honestly, I think that the idea of the court, I think, is good, but I think, CARICOM leaders have so much to do, just locally. And I always say that our election cycle is so frequent, right? That, before these guys could breathe, something else is happening, right? Elect a government for 5 years, but it's not actually 5 years. After 2.5 years, they're thinking about the next election and whether they'll win, right? That's a reality, right? But so many things are, and then, listen, you love sport, I love sports. Honestly, to the ordinary person, they don't see the connection between sports, the economy, and whatever. As far as they're concerned, when they wake up in the morning, they want to make sure when they open the tap, there is water. The kid could go to school, and when they go to the hospital, they have a broken hand, they could get plaster of Paris and that kind of stuff. If you go to them and you say, listen, we need to boost sports tourism or whatever, they were like watching you with their eyes open. But I think the idea is good, but how do we move from doing that court? How do we drop people to set up this court? Do we have the talent resident in the Caribbean? to do all this kind of work. I mean, it's a good, but how do we move? I mean, there's a lot of ideas floating around, but how do we move from step 1 to step 2 to get that code going? And how do we move to that issue we talked about previously about packaging sports? So that those are two separate issues. How do we do all these things at the same time? Because we're so far behind, I agree, as a region. I mean, we absolutely were left with nothing as colonized countries. And we can't creep. We have to run like 100 miles per hour. How do we do? So in a way, while I see the need for these things, I also sympathize with the governments and the people in the region, both in terms of the resources, the time, and the money to do these things. And I think whether we are sports broadcasters, sports commentators, sports observers, we have to assist in bringing the ideas and making suggestions as to how the things could move. So that's why, as I earlier suggested, that maybe a delegation go to CARICOM. The idea of us just talking and expecting somebody to listen, a sports minister somewhere listening and take up the ideas and go in the ministry Monday to do it, it won't work. Yeah. I think we ourselves need to carry a little of the weight and move beyond just the talking and help to get the thing going. You understand? So that's what.
We're talking about talking, and I mean, I'm no as a matter of disclosure when it comes to Mia Motley, you know, I worship Mia Motley, so thorough. But Patricia Walcott is saying Mia Motley walks the walk and talks the talk. She is a woman of conviction and follow-up. Her fights are uphill. It takes time. She's fighting on the world stage and is doing it without much support. She says Mia Motley raised that same question, talking with no action. And remember, Mia Motley said that, hey, we need to go, Barbados in particular, well, in that sense, Republic. It's a Republic road we go in. And I think later this month, for the independence, Barbados will be a republic, the Republic of Barbados, you know. So in a way, you know, she walks the walks, she talks the talk. One thing I can say about Mia Motley when it comes to that, just deviating a little from sports, is that even if, as someone was saying, even if she's lying, she is believable. She speaks with conviction. She is believable because, you know, she is very eloquent. I mean, I think she gives the new meaning to politics in the region in particular. You know, there's some level of sincerity and, you know, a lot of things that goes with it. I think probably the prior to that might have been Morris Bishop in terms of eloquence and things like that. You know, Morris will look up in the sky and just speak and, you know, he will just be going. Mia Motley reminds me of that. Yeah, back to the thing now. So your good partner Oswald Pele Dabo is saying, Lincoln Deputy, one day I mentioned in conversation with an old football stalwart and former national player that we should get our young players to play football with their heads. He politely reminded me that the name of the game was football. This is that type of jokes. Okay. Hey, Billy, good afternoon, Billy. Billy always does something. And yeah, so reminding him that, you know, yeah, so telling them play with their head, hey, that's just football. So
that's okay. I mean, Americans play football, but they play it with their hands. So Pele, that's no big deal, you know what I mean?
yeah, well, I love this one, you know, yeah. But, you know, yeah, but on a serious note, though, Toro, and I think, you know, the point you're making there, and it's something I probably may try to engage the Josephs in particular, Brian Lewis and others, that yes, we may be talking, we may be writing a lot, but I think it's better if there's an engagement, a formal engagement, and probably the history will say that, hey, we tried and we failed, you know?
Absolutely.
Than probably not to engage the you know, the power brokers, etc., and, you know, lay it on the table. And, you know, we're going into a new dispensation post pandemic, and so many things will be changing. Sports obviously will have to be seen as probably a new pillar of the economy, we could, and there are so many things that will be happening. Like, for example, how do we in the region embrace technology? The whole point of the high cost of intra-regional travel, and administrators, as Mr. Keith Joseph was saying, the need for administrators now to use technology. So use the resources, the scarce resources, both for the athletes themselves, the participants to participate, and for more programs for them. And, the administrators, yes, in some instances, you may need to be there physically, but in other, you can be, as they have been doing during the pandemic, a lot of Zoom calls and things were happening, things were taking place, there were mass participation, as a matter of fact. More blended, as we see in this weekend. The CANOC General Assembly in St. Lucia is a blended in terms of some physical and some virtual, and these sort of things like that. So
right. The other point is, Bascom, we also, and you and I have spoken about that also, about documentation. We need to move to the level where things are documented, because Mr. Joseph, Cheney, and Keith, whoever else may not be there forever. So if we try to get this thing going now and it's going for 5 years, and after 5 years they drop out, the template, the documentation is there, so somebody else could easily take over, right? We need to start documenting this stuff so it's there as a document that people can always refer to, right? Unless we do that, we'll be spinning top in mud. So the idea of the delegation also, and formally doing it, is one, to set up a template so others could keep following up on it. And the second thing is also, we have to engage the populace. While you and I and others are passionate about sport, the general population may not be passionate about this sports tourism and the government pumping money into it. You have to carry them along with you. And if in the process of engaging CARICOM, we could educate the public at the same time, we'll be going a long way. If constituents start putting pressure on the MPs to do this thing, it will happen faster than we think. So we need to engage the public. So having a formal document, a formal deposition to CARICOM will also help in engaging the general public.
2 quick points there. Patricia Walcott is saying, good idea. And Pele saying, remember, Jack was the kingmaker in FIFA due to the number of CONCACAF votes, and that generally voted on block. Yeah, well, that's true. The number of votes, CONCACAF carried some weight at that time. But a point you made there, which is very important, we have spoken about that on many occasions, in terms of the whole issue of documentation. And it's a nice segue into this part from Keith Joseph, which I want you to listen and then we'll comment on. It's the retirement of Lavon Spencer, the top high jumper in the Caribbean, I should say, female high jumper in the Caribbean. She's from St. Lucia. She has dominated high jump in the region, and as a professional athlete, she has represented St. Lucia for the better part of 20 years, 2 decades. At World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Olympic Games, Pan Am Games, just name it, and things like that. So, and she has announced her retirement this week. And Mr. Keith Joseph, paid a little tribute to her. And but the point you were making there, we'll come back to talk about it in a moment.
Lavon is a personal friend, actually. She started running at the time when our own Kinik Alexander in St. Vincent and the Grenadines started running. They went to World Youth together in Deprechin several years ago, and I think it was the second or third edition of World Youth Championship.
Is he frozen?
Okay. Yeah. Tora, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. Tora, you there now?
Yes, I am.
Right. Okay. Stand by. I think we have. Let me see if I can get Miss. Yes. Just. Okay. Right. Toro. let me just see if I can get back Mr. Keith Joseph on that point there. I think it was a very important point. We just missed out on it a bit there. Yes, Keith Joseph and Spencer's retirement. Okay.
Lavon is a personal friend, actually. She started running at the time when our own Kinik Alexander and St. Vincent the Grenadines started running. They went to World Youth together in Debrecen several years ago, and I think it was the second or third edition of World Youth Championships. Lavon has been an outstanding athlete. She has lifted St. Lucia and, of course, the OECS onto the front burner of Caribbean track and field athletics. She became the best female high jumper in the Caribbean for many years, dominated that. She held many records. She won medals at Central American and Caribbean Games, Pan Am Games, and so on. So, when we see athletes come to the end of the career, we want to thank them wholeheartedly for their contribution, for what they have done, not just for the sport, but for the countries that they have represented, and for successive generations of children to be able to look at her own performance record and to feel that they can emulate that and perhaps even strive for higher. It's a tribute to the organizations in St. Lucia that have supported her, both financially as well as sporting-wise, in terms of availing her of the opportunities to become what she has become as an international ambassador for the country, for the OECS and for the Caribbean. I don't want to say that she'll be sorely missed, because I don't think she's going anywhere. I think we need to have Lavon and others like her look back at their respective countries, look back at this region, and reach a hand out to sort of help those who are behind to achieve what they have achieved and go even one or two steps better. Because I think that, we tend to say, okay, thank you, and bid them goodbye. I think we should say thank you and welcome to another phase in the ways in which you can use sport to facilitate the development of our respective countries in the Caribbean.
Toro, let me see. Toro.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, I guess as much is a conversation we have been having. You're hearing Mr. Joseph is speaking, and I'm certain the word documentation is just swiveling around your mind, and these sort of things. But, Mr. Joseph, myself, you and others may know of Lavon Spencer. Okay, that's fine. But how many, even St. Lucians, for example, how many in the Caribbean following sports to some extent, or young athlete, may have known or will know of Lavon Spencer, if you understand what I'm saying? The whole issue of documentation, Toro. You take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something we need to move to. I mean, I think even in lobbying CARICOM, as we are suggesting, perhaps we could, in our own countries, lobby our governments in their sports ministries, they kind of have someone dedicated to recording and on doing whatever and keeping records and information about our national athletes as far back as they can go. I know you and I have spoken about doing a project. I mean, we have our full-time jobs, we have other things doing that will take some time, but it's something we need to do. And I also noticed that, just to mention, you mentioned about honoring her and what she has done. And I must say, and I know your Calypso cricketers, I know everybody beating them these days, Bermuda, Canada, Burkina Faso, Afghanistan. But I must say, I was kind of pleased the way the Gail and Bravo were honored. I mean, the way the send off they got at that game. It's things like that we need to do. We must put aside whether we like the person. People who have contributed for many, many years, they gave their best effort. We have to find a way to give them a good send off. And I was kind of impressed with the way the thing, and maybe at the West Indies cricket level, they could find something to do for Gail and Bravo. And when people retire, honor them. They gave off the best. They didn't always win or perform the way we like, but honor them. And we need to do that. That's something. I mean, again, maybe it's part of a colonial heritage. We don't do it, but people in North America and Europe, they honor everybody. You go down any major metropolitan city in Canada and the United States, there are big monument statue of people who fought in wars we never hear about.
Right.
Whether the war was just or not, they honor them. We still talking about whether we should, recognize the PRA fellas and all that kind of stuff. But people have no qualms about honoring their own, whether military, whether in sports, whatever. Again, we could take a page from them. So getting back to your point, yes, the documentation and honoring our athletes, even our politicians. We may not like a prime minister, but they serve at the national level, they serve the country. Honor the people. You could have your personal thing with them. So both points were well made by Mr. Joseph. Well made.
And as Patricia Walcott is adding a Caribbean Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's important for generations to, get to understand and to read and thorough on that point as well, because you yourself as an author, do you think we need some more or rather have more literature, Caribbean literature of our sports heroes in the curriculum in the region?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think we need to listen. There's enough literature around in the Caribbean in almost every country, where slowly we could start including Caribbean text into the curriculum. It's a must. It's the only way you could build a national pride and national culture, by letting people learn about these things from early. So part of the problem the West Indies cricket team has right now, I believe, is that the guys haven't learned how cricket is tied into our national pride and to the whole struggle of against colonialism to independence, or it was tied into the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. These things are not just sports. So as you just said earlier in the program, a recreation thing where man go and have fun. Sports and culture is tied into who we are as a people. So it must be taught. I mean, how can we still be just utilizing text from foreign countries? Nothing is wrong with the text, but the only way we can learn about ourselves is by reading about people who know about the culture. I remember the first time I read a book by a West Indian author, and I was amazed. And I said, the first time I saw us represented in this book, I said, wow. And the people were talking like us, West Indian, they're playing cricket. And I was like shocked, but we need to do it, Bascom. I mean, it's not a if, it's not a but. We need to do it. It's the only way. I mean, Sampa died, for example. And I listened to some of the broadcasts and stuff like that. And you could clearly see that the announcers had no ideas who Sampat was. They heard he was somebody who played football for Grenada. But there was nothing behind it. I mean, there was nobody that spoke to locally who played with Sampat and that kind of stuff. If Ray wasn't there, I mean, Sampat might have get 2 paragraphs somewhere in the back of the newspaper or something. So it's hurtful. I mean, it's painful that we don't know of ourselves, but we need to do it. There's no if buts perhaps. Yeah, we need to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, yep. Anything apart from West Indies cricket on your mind before we go?
The Toronto Maple Leafs are playing tonight, so I'm getting ready.
I know.
Yeah. But seriously, do we have any idea as to what the sporting calendar looks like in Grenada next year? Whether there'll be things like intercall? I know we have some cricket coming up.
Well, I saw someone shared with me track and field calendar, and they definitely the issue of intercall. I saw intercall on it and some local meets and things like that. But again, I assume the association is doing that in the event that things are back to normal. Okay.
Right.
I know. I see Mr. Chenny Joseph, the president, is posting there now. Very long, but I'm certain GFA is already getting things back in motion because he has been clamoring for some form of recreational sports to be back. Well, the government announced at the time when he was saying that he wasn't aware that there was, the SRO or whatever it is, that such and such is the case. Oh, he said football is likely to resume end of month. Okay, so the end of November,
Absolutely. Yeah.
football
Yeah.
resume. That's from the president of the Grenada Football Association. So it's good to hear that. But he made a long pants point there too. So let me go to it. The issues relating to many of our desired pursuits require determination, self-confidence, perseverance, and a desire to succeed. I make note of Keith Joseph's desire to have CARICOM leaders engage different minds to look at sports in our region. One simple way this can start is a commitment from those regional leaders and politicians to give recognition to such pursuit by allowing the establishment of a subcommittee on regional sports tourism 2030 and beyond. I fully support discussion, I assume, on this. So, Toro, Chenny is going a bit further. You mentioned about the subcommittee, but he's talking about a subcommittee on regional sports tourism 2030.
But Bascom, you know, River Road people always want to compete with Wolf Boys, eh? So I'm not surprised at all. You know?
Jenny, this one is for you, boy. Yeah, but certainly, but the whole engagement is, and now that Chenny is is a member of the Olympic Committee, for example, it means that he can add that to, in terms of pushing the narrative, on getting that sort of engagement. Pele is saying, let's start with Beyond the Boundary by CLR James. So I assume you're referring to the regional literature, the Caribbean
very good
literature.
book. Very good book. Very good
Certainly,
book. Very good.
Beyond the Boundary.
And Bascom, before I continue, before I forget, there was when we were talking about the court of arbitration, something that really riled me was the swimming going into the Olympics when they were telling these swimmers they can't win. I mean, like, what's wrong with these guys? Yeah.
So that again, it shows that again the Europeans, they control the whole narrative, everything like that. So again, I think it begs the point whether, as Keith Joseph was saying, that may have some legs to itself. That when it comes to sports, we may need to be thinking that way as well. Yes, we can understand with the Court of Appeal, the Regional Court of Appeal, all the politics involved, etc., and some of the politicians was thinking beyond that. And then we have a lot of politicians who are lawyers themselves, so we could understand why there was that sort of, to some extent, the backlash, and when someone was saying whether we should go to have this, referendum and all these sort of things like that. So yeah, you understand. But when it comes to a regional court of appeal, court of arbitration for sport, but it was noted by the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee that for the region to go forward with that, because their statutes and the constitutions have this court of arbitration in sports embedded in it, they will have to revisit their statutes as well.
Wow.
Because again, in some instances, their constitutions basically are
that's tough
by the international federations, and they have this actually embedded in their constitution. So they will have to look at that hurdle and get beyond that hurdle in terms of how we can ensure that we can recognize our code. Because even Africa was talking about in the same discussion, the ANOC General Assembly, Africa was talking about how expensive it is for them, for the African countries there's in Africa to, having to have representation and legal representation and etc. and thing. And why can't we have it in our continental jurisdiction? Okay, it's easy for the Europeans, but when you have to pay in some instances, or especially when you have to recruit a lawyer, and it's so expensive. And especially if you're recruiting a lawyer to do something in Grenada or in the Caribbean, the costs compared to that in Europe, because they will look at, so many factors, so many factors to put cost to it and things like that. So all these things were things that were discussed, and Keith Joseph was talking about that. That is something that they really need to have the discussion. But the observation was made about the whole issue regarding the constitution, because most of these regional associations, they have CAS, which is the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is based in Europe, embedded in their constitution. Richie Oliver is saying, during this COVID period, hats off to GFA and the GCA. As for track and field, they seem to be sleeping. Well, I know Richie is saying because the GFA and the GCA were able to do a lot of live broadcast of their activities, the GCA, so folks were able to look at cricket from the stadium, for example. Folks were able to look at football, and things like that. So because the both associations, both GFA and GCA, ensured that with the limited funds that were allowed during the COVID time, and with limited, sporting engagements and things like that, they were able to have fans look at it in the comfort of their homes, And hats off, yes, congratulations to them, and well deserved in terms of that. Any other thing, Tora?
Not for the moment. Yeah, I thank you for inviting me. It was a good discussion. I think we could, each person in their own little corner could play a role in development process in the Caribbean, whether it's Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean, whether it's through sports, whatever our strengths are, whether as writers or broadcasters. I think we need to do a bit. I mean, it's easy for for all of us to criticize, but I think it's more useful and effective if we can contribute, whether it's ideas, and contribute realistic ideas. I mean, there's no point in saying one of the Caribbean countries, let's try and get to the moon or whatever. We know that won't happen, but realistic ideas that you're serious about, that can implement. So I welcome the opportunity to be here, and I hope we move this forward. And we see some.
But before you go, Toro, what's your, in terms of optimism regarding sports, especially the Caribbean, in probably the next year or two, the challenges that we most likely will face?
Well, we have to adapt to the change. I mean, COVID has changed everything, and just like the rest of the world, we have to adapt. And human beings are able to adapt. I mean, this has been happening for centuries, for generations. I think one of the big issues will be, whether people like it or not, is the vaccination issue, right? We have a very low level of vaccination in the Caribbean region. That may impact how much we could do, especially for national teams that are traveling. You wouldn't be able to enter most countries unless you're vaccinated. But even locally, unless the government decide, well, as Trump said, let's just ride this thing, and whether vaccinated or not, you just let people do their own thing. But the science tells you what will happen if you try that. So I think how well we do, I know the sports administrators will do the best they can do to get sports going. They want to get it going. But I think from the point of view of the fans, it will depend on how many people are vaccinated. And because without an audience in sports, without spectators, I mean, you lose a little bit of the flavor of the sporting event. Most athletes will like the spectators in front of them when they are performing. It kind of gives you a vibes, it gives you energy. So at that level, in terms of spectator involvement, it very much will be, again, depend on vaccination, how many people are vaccinated. But sports will go ahead. The world will adapt economically in sports and in everything, in education. So, COVID has changed everything,
right?
Like it or not.
All right. Let me say good afternoon from this part of the world to Greg Vargas. Greg is actually based in Australia. He's Australian and very close to the Caribbean. Whether it's Grenada or Antigua, very, very close to. He has worked along with many. Well, the Grenada team has physio, number of international World Cup. Not World Cup. Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games. Greg has been there assisting with us. And Greg is in Australia. So he's saying now, I think he says 80,000. Yeah, he's corrected it and say 80,000 people expected for Boxing Day test between Australia versus England. Yeah, 80,000. Yeah, 80,000. Wow. For the Boxing Day test, we're talking about the Boxing Day classics and whatever takes place traditionally on Boxing Day. And it's normally the test. This time, Australia versus England, Boxing Day test, 80,000 people. He says also double vaccinations are required with proof required. Wow. So 80,000 expected, but double vaccinations are required with proof also required. And as Toro, as you're saying, that is something we'll have to adapt to, because that's how the world is spinning now, in that direction, where to be part of it, as a matter of fact, to get a job now, or in some instances to maintain a job, you have to be vaccinated. Yeah. So certainly, and sports is no exception. So it's something that our sportsmen, sportswomen, even our administrators and fans to an extent will have to consider in the very near future, because just as a couple of years ago, to travel to certain countries, you must have certain vaccination. You have to show that you were vaccinated against measles or whatever, certain things like that. So I know it was for Brazil. When we were going to Brazil in 2007, I went to Brazil, had to show proof of vaccination for something. Yeah, proof of vaccination for something, and if I didn't have the vaccination, I was not being allowed. And they told me that you have to show proof of vaccination. It was 2007. That's the first time I was traveling to Brazil. So, it's nothing new in terms of vaccination, We know that you had to show proof of vaccination to start school, as kindergarten, and primary school or whatever it is like that. You had to show proof of your vaccination status as little boys, starting school, some colleges, some universities, you have to show proof of vaccination, so it's really nothing new, but it will be the new norm in this dispensation, Pele is saying, Bas, congrats on City's derby victory. I'm accepting it, Pele. Thanks very much. I know you folks have been very quiet today. Last week, those guys were on top of me, saying all sorts of things, But they're quiet this time around, because the scoreline was already is Manchester United 0, Manchester City 2. I like to say that's how the BBC will say it in sports. But that's the thing about it. But Toro, thanks very much. Thanks for being part of the program. I appreciate you being always a pleasure having you and hearing your say. Hoping that certain things that we have discussed, the projects and all this time, is something we will hopefully could get in earnest in the new year. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Bascom. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. So that's Toro Deputin in Toronto, Canada. As usual, we always have the Canadians in. Rudy and Sylvan sometimes. We have Toro Deputin. And thanks to all those. Patricia, thank you very much for being around from start to finish. Greg, Pele, Dabo, Greg in Australia, greetings to you. Dawanda, I know it's probably morning time, or probably midday next day, Richie and Chenny and all the others, including David Gray. Yeah, David Gray in St. Lucia. Thanks very much, and Roger Augustine and all the others who were part of the program this afternoon. Thank you for being part of the program. Hope to have another program on Thursday. By the way, as indicated, come Sunday, the time in the US, well, we have daylight saving time, so it's fall, so time will fall back 1 hour. Where I am currently in Austin, Texas, I will be on a 2 hours behind Grenada time. Yeah, Eastern Caribbean time, 2 hours behind Eastern Caribbean time, 1 hour behind Eastern time, which is New York and the East Coast, okay? Because I'm in Austin, Texas. So the program, I will let you know during the week, and so maybe adjusted a bit. We'll let you know about the time, whether or not we remain the same time and how it may be adjusted, okay? Hoping still to have a sport administrator from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the upcoming program. We have made contact. It's just, I think what had happened is that just when we were confirming participation in the program, there was an outbreak with the COVID among the team members, and gave him time to deal with that. So that is understandable. And we're hoping to engage some more sports administrators in the region and, get some ideas and some talking points and discussion going. And some of the issues that, raised by Keith Joseph. Keith Joseph has agreed to be back on the program another time, probably most likely on a Saturday, where we could have a full discussion with Keith. We'll have a total engagement. We'll ask you to pose questions to Keith, and Keith will be able to answer those questions. He's very knowledgeable, has lots of information, and as soon as he gets past one, this weekend is the General Assembly of CANOC in St. Lucia. Next weekend is the general elections of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Olympic Committee. So we'll give Keith some time. So following that, we probably have Keith. As Patricia says, Keith, we need you back. So hopefully Keith will be the General Secretary. He will be the General Secretary or remain the General Secretary of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Olympic Committee. Well, even if he's not, he has agreed to be back to talk about sports, and we hope to have him and to discuss, and for you folks to ask him all the questions. Thank you, Theo Duncan, for your greetings. Nice hearing from you as well. So, folks, that's all from this for this afternoon here in Austin, Texas. It's always a pleasure having you on the program, and I hope to see you hopefully on Thursday, God's willing. I will convey the time to you when we will have, what time we'll have the program on Thursday. So until then, I want you to have a very enjoyable and pleasant weekend.